Hey y'all, it's Bart, and welcome to another episode of Soccer for Us. And we get to talk about the thing that happened, the thing that we have been wanting to happen for, I don't know, at least 18 months, if not longer. Gregg Berhalter is officially fired as the head coach of the U.S. men's national team. He was brought back to coach this team after being his contract unrenewed, if you will, after the 2022 World Cup. He was brought back in June of that year to May of that year to continue with the national team after several incidents that were both his fault and not his fault. But about a year after that, he's finally been fully relieved of his duties. And now we have to move on to find a coach who can get us to a more promising result at the 2026 World Cup. So, to talk about Gregg and his shortcomings and where we go from here is, again, the greatest historian in U.S. men's soccer Twitter history. It is Thomas, a.k.a. U.S. Keeper.
Yeah, a lot to talk about with this. It's it's kind of bittersweet too. It's not the process isn't complete, right? We have to, it's a steps process. As I mentioned earlier in the week about doing this, so this is just step one, and it does matter, right? It does matter in terms of how they're going to conduct the process. So it'll be. I think there's still a lot of waiting. There's still a lot of rumors ahead of us.
Yeah, definitely a lot of things to parse as we go through this process beyond just Gregg being fired. But I am glad that they pulled the trigger on this despite not really having a new coach in place. I think that was my concern, as they were going to try to wait until they definitely had a guy. But they said that he's been fired and that a search process had already begun. It was time. I think that's just where we're at. It was time to move on from Gregg. Personally, I didn't want him back for a second cycle regardless. I don't think that second cycle managers really ever live up to the success or, whatever you want to call what Gregg did the first cycle. And the problem became that eventually just trying to meet expectations caught up to Gregg. All of his PowerPoints and goals and objectives always seemed to just state obvious standards that this team needed to meet. And he just seemed always okay with just getting by. And in the 2024 Copa America, the tournament that we hosted, his plan to just get by, while, yes, it was derailed by a senseless, stupid thing that a player did on the field, the plan never accounted for anything going wrong. And that would be the theme of what I think is Gregg's tenure, is he had plan A, he never had any other plans. I think it's fair to say that he helped redirect the program after a catastrophic event, not making the World Cup, being, eliminated from that in 2017. Took over after a tumultuous time and took over after an uncertain time of 2018. But even that was brought on by some questions of whether he was actually the best fit for the role, or he just happened to be related to a guy who worked high up at U.S. Soccer. I think this just was him hitting the ceiling and the team hitting the ceiling that they could reach under him. And I think Copa America exposed all the issues this team has had under Berhalter the entire time. It was time for him to go. It was time for U.S. Soccer to move on, and you cannot accept getting grouped at a tournament you host. And because of that, you have to have, if you don't meet standards, you have to have consequences, and these are the consequences. You get fired.
Yeah, I think Gregg really look, I'm very critical of Gregg, and what I would say is this though: he did, he had a tough kind of task at hand, right? Get this team to the World Cup and be somewhat successful there, right? And he did that, and he had a lot of young players, all these things, obstacles in front of him, but right, and he did that fine. But then he wasn't able to duplicate that again, right? I mean, depending on who you ask, when was the peak of this Berhalter era? Some people, I kind of say it was probably sometime in 2021, where you say, okay, they're starting to get it. They're starting to do that. You could say the World Cup. You could say, after the World Cup when they, beat Mexico and and Canada in Nations League. But like, it's in that 2-year buffer window where the team kind of figured itself out for the most part, but then it never elevated above that, right? We had poor performance after poor performance on the road. The Colombia match. I mean, to me, the players just become very complacent. That's on the coach. They became very comfortable. That's on the coach. And I think it's just his soccer IQ, his soccer abilities did not allow for that next level that this group has in it. And so, that's why the next manager needs to be someone of that ilk. You cannot just bring in another guy that's part of an old boys network type of crap, because to me as a fan, I'm not going to put up with that either, right? Like I'm that's crazy, because you're literally living in insanity. And so I think that's the general frustration. We're here. It's great to talk about rumors and coaches and all these things, but in reality, they've got to make some tough decisions and really say, what's this 2-year, 18-month, whatever you want to call it, window of time that we have to do this. Like, this is the goal. It's easy you can make it work financially. Figure it out, right? You've got sponsors that want to do it. Look, I don't think they ever do a crowdsourcing thing, but you know what? I might donate some money to fundraise for a new coach, right? So
Well,
I think
that brings up, I think, the best point that you just mentioned is this doesn't need to be a rushed process, but it does need to be quick. It needs to be prompt. It does seem like U.S. Soccer, as we talked today on July 11th at 6:00, they have been talking to coaches. And to your point, they've got to make decisions. They've got to move forward. You do have until, jokingly, I say you have until September 7th. Obviously, we know it's like a week or two before that, but you have about a month truly to make sure you do your due diligence and find the best guy. But as I'm sure you would love to talk about, it's, there are coaches out there that won't be there if you hadn't made this move to get rid of Gregg so that you can go find another coach.
right. I mean, that's the thing. So again, you have to be swift on this. I think there's a lot of candidates. I think there are, in my opinion, very few that are currently under contract that fall into ones you would even consider. But again, I think there's some Olympic coaches that could be in that mix. And I mean, honestly, you're kind of shooting for that week, probably the end of the week of the 12th of August, right, to make the announcement, right? Enough time
Yeah.
to get them in, select a roster, right, and do this, because you can't. I don't think you can go and unless you have the absolute perfect candidate. I don't think you can wait for even one of these windows, or even to the beginning of next year, which there have been some rumors that And I posed the question: would you wait for a coach for that? I mean, if it's the right coach, yeah, you might consider that, but why would you have to wait for them, right? This is not Emma Hayes situation, right? Like, um, kind of, in that piece of it, because you've already missed the big tournament, right? So you've got to make sure that you're able to maximize the possibly 29 FIFA window matches that you're probably going to have between now and the World Cup.
Yeah, it's, again, you do have to start quickly because you wasted time rehiring Berhalter. And I think that's the other thing that just goes back to me being incredibly frustrated by this, how the second cycle went, is you wasted a good 5 months, talking around in circles, 6 months really, to rehire the dude who then you fired a year and a month later. That was wasted time because in one way, shape, or form, you could have started a new direction, right? Or Greg could have just been in and, maybe we would have learned sooner that he truly wasn't the dude to lead us to 2026.
Yeah, but I'm of the belief they always looked at Greg as a 2-cycle manager, right?
I
Because
agree. I think you're probably right.
you don't
Unfortunately.
yeah, I think they kind of said, well, if Greg can, well, if he can do this, right, then we'll consider that. Like if he can get out of the group and make us look decent, then we'll definitely
Right.
rehire him, right? And I think that's I guess I understand that, but again, didn't they learn the lesson? Like Bruce Arena wanted to me is the one I always go back to because that's the one that he actually got through, right, the 2 cycles. And
Yeah.
so, and Bruce will admit he lost the locker room a little bit. The team wasn't really prepared. They were probably a little too cocky from '02 and all these sort of expectations. And they had played well. They had some stretches in there. They were a very good team, but for some reason he couldn't put it all together and he lost it. And so, um, in one way or the other, the coaches get a little complacent. After you kind of get comfortable with it and figure out how to work the relationship, then as players you're gonna work that, and then there's no drive, there's no hunger, and I think that you lose that a little bit. And this team is too young because their whole team is young. Really, you can't you can't lose that fire inside you. You can't lose that you know desire to do that. And the fact that the players didn't show up either is I think it speaks more to than people realize because the players were they just complacent? We're like, oh yeah, we're just going to show up and just happen. They're not that good. We've talked about this. They're not that good to be able to show up against the Panama and provide performances like even 10 players down. With only 10 players. So
My question is now, we need to kind of identify exactly where or what Berhalter did wrong. Um, and I just think it starts with the fact that, as you mentioned, he did the things that, quote, earned him a second cycle, right? He got the team to the World Cup. The team looked fairly competent at the World Cup. I think that's fair to say. Even that Netherlands match, which was bad, okay, you got beat by the Netherlands. They're really good. Yes, we need to be at the point where we need to beat those teams, but it's understandable that this team at that point in time wasn't at that level. But there showed zero ability for Greg to take them to that level. And throughout his tenure, his best wins remain over a bad Mexico team. In fact, you could argue that his best wins were, the 2021 Nations League when they beat Mexico in that 3-2 crazy game, which was at that time probably the best Mexico team of his cycle. But it still that was about it. There wasn't any other real notable victories. And I think that's, again, when you look at the second cycle and you continue the problem of really just meeting expectations. I don't want to say doing the bare minimum, but doing what is bare requirement, um, that was the problem. And then I think also, to me, he never really approached friendlies or anything other than the big tournaments as something that was meaningful and something that needed to be met with intensity. Did you feel the same?
yeah, I mean, he had some opportunities to be able to try different things. We didn't see Greg once. Greg kind of he did shift. Don't get me wrong, he did shift because his initial, and there was video of it, thought of how he wanted to use Tyler Adams, as a right back, and then whatever type situation. He did evolve out of that, but then once he kind of found his little possession, U-shaped passing on the back defensive line in this huge possession thing, he really didn't, you know, go away from that, right? Take the opportunities, fine, whatever. But and so to me, he has to evolve from that, right? What was he doing when he was gone for 6 months? What was he doing when he wasn't coaching the Gold Cup? he didn't evaluate anything. And so this
It
is where,
doesn't seem like it.
but this is what drives me nuts with this thing. Like Gregg's like, oh, I'm doing all that stuff. Gregg is a cocky ego jerk, right? He really is. And so, and we saw that here in the last month with how he's responding to media, how he's, brushing this stuff off, right? You can't do that. Like you're not good enough to be able to have that ego and brush off questions. Like you don't have the control of that. And US Soccer is protecting the situation, right? Put these guys out there. I mean, what are you protecting Gregg from if you're so confident in him, right? What are you protecting him from? You know what I mean? It's not like I can see that maybe when he started, and if it started slowly, I get that. You know what? This is his second run with it, right? He's 6 years into this. Like, enough already.
Well, and I think it was very clear that when he got asked even just remotely tough questions about his job position or things like that, he acted almost of, how dare you ask me that question, and as instead of especially after the Panama game heading into the Uruguay game, this idea that he would somehow be under pressure because we might not get out of the group was like the most offensive thing to him. And just about every coach I've ever known knows that question, knows when you're in a situation that's not ideal. But for some reason to him, and I think that the problem for me is that seemed to be something foreign to him or completely alien, because no one at US Soccer had truly impressed upon him like, hey man, you go and try to go win this damn Copa America tournament, because like you probably should. But instead he treated it like he treated almost everything else. It was just a trial. Oh, it's just a test. It's just an experiment. We're going to go through the things and get experience. And it's like, at some point you got to also inject the intensity, the stakes, the inflection points into these tests, because otherwise you're not prepared for a World Cup. And it was very clear to me that this team was vastly unprepared for the Copa America tournament.
Yeah, their intensity was, which I mean, I think against Brazil was the most intensity I saw from this
Right.
U.S. squad in this window. And again, that's in a friendly after a match they got demolished in, right? So I don't expect any less in that match, but I do expect that to be consistent, right? And so you didn't see that. This is a pretty big tournament. I mean, it's not the biggest. It's probably of the FIFA tournaments that are still active, it's probably the third most competitive tournament outside the World Cup and the Euros. Um, there'll be some people that could debate that, but it's, in terms of the talent that's in there, the top end of it, like you didn't see that intensity from, you didn't see that urgency from the team, and that comes from the coach, right? It's like you have to be able to ramp it up, right? And this is what we have. We can't just wait for the World Cup. You can't just build off the World Cup from the World Cup. You have to build up when you have these chances, and they just missed it. You missed the opportunity, and he didn't seem like he even cared. He's like, yeah, whatever. Like,
Yeah, I think that is where most fans had a lot of frustrations with him. If you remember back to 2019, the team got demolished by Mexico in a friendly, right? And looking back, I understand why he was, I guess, not dismissive, abrasive toward the criticism, because he was trying to build a style of play that the team, trialed against Mexico. They ended up losing 3-0 in that friendly. But he did not understand why people would be so upset that you lose by that scoreline to Mexico, in a friendly. And I think that right there was never really truly changed. I think about the pre-World Cup friendlies in 2022 against was Saudi Arabia and Japan, right? Where they looked lost most of the time. I mean, they looked bad. It was very concerning that was the way the team looked. And it was like, he just expected the guys to be able to turn it on for a tournament. And it seemed like that was again the case coming into the Copa America. I mean, you talk about the 5-1 loss to Colombia, where especially the second half turned into just a really sad display from the team of want to and fight. Yes, as you mentioned, they came back and played well against Brazil, but you go into the Copa America and you don't have the fight to hold on to a lead against Panama, even down 10 men. And, you got just outclassed by a Uruguay team who has understood what it takes to win games of that magnitude. And I think those are the reasons why, while the players, we will talk about them, were not up to the challenge. Gregg Berhalter did not prepare them for the challenge well. And that kind of measured approach where everything was about a test and metrics transferred down to the team, and they became, I don't know, removed from that fight and tenacity that the game requires.
Yeah, because the one thing, again, I was mixed on his tenure, but the Jurgen Klinsmann tenure, he would always say, you got to play hard, you got to play fast. World Cups are different; they're different, fast, different pace, right? And so he constantly had that in the players' head, wanting them to play at the highest levels, wanting those sorts of things, so they could, when they had to ramp it up, they could, right? And so, this tournament is that opportunity to do that. And he didn't seem to ever even, yeah, it's an opportunity to play against better teams. Okay, but that's fine. But just because most of these players are playing in Europe doesn't mean they don't need some sort of motivation, from their leader to do these things, right? So they're going to kind of do what they, these sorts of things. And yeah, to me, it's just mind blowing. I don't know if he got complacent. I don't know if he got cocky. I don't know if he got lazy. I don't know. But to me, he didn't. Everything was predictable. Everything was predictable about what Gregg did.
Yes, unfortunately, it was. Yeah, we talked about this in the Copa Flameout episode, but you do have to look at the players and wonder why they weren't themselves finding that flame, that fire, the intensity, the desire inside of them. But I think specific to Gregg, they need some criticism as well, because they allowed themselves to get very cozy, very comfortable, and to the point of complacency under this coach. I mean, they fought tooth and nail to bring him back. It seemed like they love this man. And there's nothing, let me get this straight. There is nothing wrong with their respecting and enjoying playing for a coach. That is, I mean, despite what Carly Lloyd says, I think you do want to have trust, respect, and an appreciation for your head coach. And as you look back on him, you will find how much you loved playing for him. But they thought they had too much power. And maybe that's because Gregg enabled a lot of power in them with his little, players council that somehow got to make all the decisions. But they deserve some blame into why Gregg has stuck around for as long as he has. And part of it is because, as they will tell you, they would run for a wall for him. But then when it comes down to actually run through a wall for him or their teammates, their brothers, as they call it, they never did. And so that kind of oxymoronic, hypocritical, I hate to use that, but the words and the actions never matched up. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, and it's and who knows? We'll never. Maybe we will know. Maybe some players at this point will come out, right? Because at this point, he's not. I mean, knock on wood, he's not coming back, right? Right? We didn't think he was coming back the last time, but crazier things have happened, right? But I mean, look at Mexico. They hire managers back all the time. There's a freaking mess of a federation. But maybe some stuff comes out. Maybe it. Not maybe in a week, but maybe 2 years from now, some stuff comes out about that sort of thing. Because as a player, I can't. If you're a smart player, you're not going to be cutting your coaches down. You can't be doing that if you're expected to be called into the team. There are maybe you never heard them question Gregg. And so players get criticized for not saying something, but let's be honest. I mean, what are you going to say?
And very few players are going to outright criticize a coach like that. And they shouldn't, right? Because that is not, just as I would not want a coach to outright criticize and tell a player, tell us that a player sucks or whatever. I mean, I wouldn't want them to say that about a player either, let alone a coach. But they went the exact opposite.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, I think you can make certain statements to the media that indicate your displeasure of how you played, right? Like, and so like Matt Turner is getting thrown under the bus for his comment, at the end, oh, we just didn't play, trying to figure it out, like that to me, like that's not like, he's got to be a little bit more like, I don't know, it's not his first time being interviewed, so like he's got to be a little bit more,
Yep.
I guess, honest in that moment, but also like, kind of toe the line a little bit too. So because he doesn't know what's going on, and it seems like Gregg's the type of coach that does, have hold grudges against players. I mean, when we've seen that, and some of that stuff has come out a little bit. Matt Miazga being one of the players, and maybe John Brooks, we don't know, but that one still is a head scratcher. But those sorts of things where he's vindictive, right? As opposed to, and it's fine for coaches to have that fear in players, but being vindictive to like not say or question things in certain ways that's appropriate. You have to balance it, right? Gregg threw his players and the refs under the bus during this tournament. So like, I can't imagine the players appreciate that. So
No. No.
I mean, I'm sitting there listening to it. I'm like, wow, like how can the
Yeah.
players, want to play for this and run through a wall for this guy if he's saying these sorts of things, like blaming them, blaming the refs? Like, yes, those things didn't work out, but guess what? That happens. You have to adjust and figure out how you're going to adjust to that. And you didn't do that. You did not adjust in those moments. We have to overcome this because guess what? It's not going to always be easy, right? That's everywhere. And so as a coach, you have to figure out that motivation. Hey, this is the adjustment we're going to make, right? They're calling this all the time. Well, maybe we'll change this and see if we can get a few of the calls. And they don't all, nothing always goes your way. So,
yeah. I mean, look, Gregg is fired because ultimately the program he was leading, despite what Matt Turner said, was not heading in the right direction, right? And I think you have to give a lot of credit to the fans, supporters, groups. I don't know if sponsors were behind it, but there were a lot of people who were in the ear of, in some way, shape, or form, of U.S. soccer decision makers. And I hope some of the actual decision makers were upset by the fact that the coach and the team failed to make it out of the group, because at the end of the day, results matter. And even if you're trying to build this big, I think one of Gregg's problems was he was too kind of big brained. I don't know if he actually was, but he pretended to be. And, we were just not smart enough to understand his vision, I think sometimes is the way he felt. And the problem is, well, buddy, if your vision's not producing results, even, incremental results that lead to a bigger overall improvement, if they're not doing that, then there's no reason to keep the project going. You can tell me how long of a term project it is and all this that you want, but I have to see things making gradual gains or gradual improvements toward that. And this second cycle was never that.
Yeah, I mean, it just did not meet that expectation. I don't know. I just don't. It comes down to I just don't think Gregg is capable of doing it the next level piece of it. I think that's
fair to say that.
Yeah.
Like, that is okay. And that's the thing is, it was fine. He did the job for the 2022 cycle, and I am thankful to that because he did. He got the program back in what was at that point a positive direction.
But what I do believe on that too, though, is I believe that there's no American coach that can really take it to the next level.
100%.
Consistently, like, so you see the path of it, right? I said it, in some tweets earlier, right? Look at how it progressed, right? Steve Sampson was an assistant to Bora. He comes in, he's the interim, and then he gets hired as a manager, and then it's Bob Bradley, who was part of the program at some point along the way. I'm sorry, Bruce Arena was part of the program in some way, comes in, and it's all building off that, right? And then you're seeing that, like, okay, well, Arena got here, but didn't get too far. Bradley got here, but they couldn't get over the hump, right? And then they say, okay, well, this is not really working. We need something more high profile. Then you bring in Klinsman, right? And that does certain things. It brings certain attentions to the team that are helpful. But again, then Klinsmann got an ego before the World Cup. You give him, you extend his contract, do all these things that aren't really a smart way to do that. You promote someone when they haven't really accomplished the goal at hand, right? And so so some of it's on the U.S. soccer decision makers as well in terms of that sort of thing. And I think you have to create some sort of leash on it a little bit, but you also have to allow them to do what they're going to do. And so I just don't think this is where American everything, soccer related, referees, announcers, all these things, they're just not there yet. And so they're getting there,
Right.
but it's taking time. And I think to get the players there, you need a coach that's going to elevate that level of performance. And I'm sorry, they're not American.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, let's turn that to that talk then. Our desires for a new head coach, because I think, well, first off, let me just say that for the record, I think we both wanted Gregg to be not rehired, right? I think at the end of 2022, we were saying this even after the World Cup, before the Reyna stuff, before all that. Thanks, Gregg. Appreciate you. Time to move on. Because as you said, we did not have the confidence that he would take us to the next level. So then that question is there a coach out there that is realistically an option for the U.S. that can take us to that next level? And what are those characteristics specifically that you think the coach needs to take us to the next level? So for me, as much as Gregg was so focused on a specific style of play and and tactics and formation, I mean, he was married to a formation. Holy crap. I don't want a coach that is married to a certain tactical setup every match. I want him to have tactical philosophies, tactical principles, philosophical principles, ideas, those types of things where we say, hey, look, we want to do A, B, and C, and here are some basic patterns of play. Like, that's fine. But I want principles, not rules. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's pretty. It allows the players to be creative on their own, right? A little bit, right? In the framework of like, hey, this is the opponent. These are their strengths and weaknesses. We're going to try to attack their weaknesses here. Like, what I mean? Kind of basic, right? Okay, try to, they're weak in the middle, they're weak up the wing, whatever it is, and be able to do like that's kind of part of what coaching is like scouting. I don't always sense Gregg did that. Like, I sense that Gregg thought they were good enough to
Yep.
run whatever thing they could run out there and win, as opposed to saying, hey, we're on the road. It's going to be a little more challenging. We're going to try to do this sort of thing, get a couple early goals, and then maybe retreat and play deep or whatever it is. Like, you just have like a real game plan as opposed to saying we're just going to roll out the same thing over and over and over again and have no real creativity or real plan in place, and just hope we can break them down with having 75% of possession and 400.
Which to me would have been a logical evolution from Berhalter 1.0 to 2.0, right? 1.0 is we are doing this because in his long-term vision, his big brain vision, the goal is to get this thing right as much as possible, right? But then, as you said, okay, well, we got this whole thing, but now here's the little tweak we're going to make for this opponent or this situation. So, maybe it's against Panama. We know they're going to do X, Y, and Z. Panama is not a high press team, but they like to keep a higher line, whatever you want to say that they do. And this is how we're going to, in our system, exploit their weaknesses, right? That didn't happen in 2.0 Gregg Berhalter. So I'm with you. Like, lay the framework, and then how do you make it changes and adjust based on the opponent? Because sometimes it's y'all, look, we're playing Suriname. Just go out there and play, do what we do, have fun, and you're probably going to score 6 goals no matter what, Versus, look, we're playing Uruguay. This player is really hella good. This player is really good. This player is really good. They do this supremely well. And this is how we have to be aware of that and change our philosophy this game.
Right. And knowing where the players go, they're going to provide, put them in the best position for success. I don't think he did that in this Copa America in the first 2 matches where he Reyna's playing midfield, but he's playing back like a 6, maybe an 8, like where he needs to be up in the attack. We've seen Reyna do that, and he's done it well, and the team is successful when he's doing that, right? And so it was a little bit more success against Uruguay when he was playing on the wing, but that's the stuff like like, I'm not expecting the coach to go out there and tell me what they're going to do and how they're going to do it, but like you can see what's working and what's not,
Right.
and like, is there no one calling him out on that? Like, he's not like he's has any great resume. I mean, coming into it.
That was the thing that I bothered me the most, is that it was billed to us as he is some soccer genius. And I'm not saying he doesn't know the game better than I do, because he does. But don't pretend like he had like this immense, wonderful track record before coming in that just like made him immune to criticism, you know?
Yeah, he hadn't won a trophy. He failed over in Europe, and then he came over here and did okay, but like he didn't have any of this like, wow, a couple trophies, you
Yeah.
know, a system, making it work with the players you have type of thing. Like he had a very, and a lot of people said he had a very strict type of system that needed these sorts of players to succeed in it, right?
Yeah.
And so, and he was very rigid in the beginning, and it just didn't work. And then he did adjust, but he only adjusted to the point where he got comfortable with enough is enough, right? Type of.
Yeah. Well, and that's something that for me, I need a coach coming in that can and will humble the players and get them hungry for more. Because I think Greg, again, treated them very well. That's great. But it didn't seem like he was able to humble them and say, hey, man, you're not as good as you think you are. So instead of just doing this, you need to do this. Or, hey, y'all, we're not good enough to just go out and beat Panama because we show up. We have to go out there with intensity. And in fact, they're pretty good at some things. So this is what we have to do to combat that. It just seemed like we weren't a humble team a lot of times, in the sense that though we respected our opponents, we never thought, oh, well, we're better than them. And sometimes players need to be humbled individually, sometimes they need to be motivated and inspired differently from each player. And I don't think he was a very motivational or inspirational person at all. And I do think, despite what some people would say, at the international level, you need a manager who's going to be able to motivate a team each game. Because the tactics at the international level are weird, because you just don't have the time to fully implement a tactical structure. So you have to have a base framework. And then, as you saw with Uruguay and Colombia the other day, a lot of that wasn't tactics. In fact, 90% of that match was not tactics. It was go out there, win your individual battle, go out there and fight as a team, and go find a goal or two and try to win.
Exactly. And I think the one thing I think what happened was, I think for as young as the players were and inexperienced on the international level, so was Greg, right? And they kind of all evolved together, right? And they all kind of like, oh, we're all together in this, everyone. Like, but you're not,
Yeah.
though. And that's where like they all probably felt that way. Hey, we're in this together. He's a coach, player's player. Like you can balance that, right? You can balance like those sorts of things where like, you can say, hey, you know what? I'm gonna have to come down hard on you guys because you're not doing what you need to do. I mean, we're not friends out here, but we can be friendly type of balance, right? It's that, it's like being a parent, right? You have to be able to, but it is like you have to be
Yep.
able to say, hey, no to this, yes to this when it matters, and you're the one in charge, and you can't have that sort of friendship with that. And that's sometimes maybe the disadvantage in having a former player be a coach, because they remember how it might have been with them, right? And or I would have done it differently. I wanted the coach to always be buddy buddy with us, right? That's not their job, right? Their job is to get results and pull everything they can out of the players, and I think that's part of the problem there too. And to your point, you have to be ready for a knockout drag out fight, because that's what's going to be. You can't be like, well, geez, that's not part of what the game plan is. Like, and there you can see them overthinking, right? Overthinking out there to try to get these, whatever these, rules that Greg had, to have certain possession, to have certain passing numbers, to have all these things in there that he thought equaled a win, in these stupid metrics. I love a good stat, but but sometimes possession, you don't always have to have the majority of possession to win a match.
Yeah.
How many counters did this team score? Like, to me, like, you look back at the old US teams, again, the talent, the skill level wasn't there like we're having now. But those teams had counters, and they just did things differently, like you know, that allowed them to beat good teams in those moments, as opposed to be like, here's the script, follow it, right?
Yep. Um, are there any other characteristics that you want in the new coach?
Characteristics. I mean, I don't know. I think I do want to coach with certain experiences, I guess. I don't know if that falls under the characteristics, but like you
I
have
think that
to.
does. Yeah, I think that does. Yeah.
I believe for this specific window, you do not have the opportunity to. This is not a trial period for anyone, right? I think
No.
and this is not required necessarily, but I think you have to try your best to find a manager who has international experience. And I was saying that 2 times ago, right?
Yep.
Because to me, like it's a different type of preparation, right? They understand, hey, I've got these guys for 9 days, and this is what I'm going to do with that. And between that window, here's what I'm going to do as the coach, right? I want to talk to players, scout players. Again, I do want to coach. Look, Greg did a lot wrong, and but he did the dual national piece was something that he did well.
Yeah.
This coach also needs to have that in him to be able to convince other dual nationals to come to the United States and play
Yep.
for the United States, right? Like, and not lose them and keep them, right? So that I think that is the other characteristic we also need in that. Other than that, I think I really want to make sure that that experience is
Yeah.
there. I don't think we're going to land a top tier, contender. I just don't see that in the cards. As much as I want that, I just don't see that in the cards, and I'm not sure a great club manager translates into a great international player because they can buy players, they can fill the gaps. We talk about it
Yes.
all the time. I love the big name, but like tell me what they're going to do for me on the international stage and the scene that they've never worked in before, right? So and, and again, this is where you can't be like, well, they might be able to do it. They have to be able to do it. We're not we no more misses here. We can't miss anymore. You have to exceed expectations. That's the goal. Exceed them. So whatever the goal is, you need to exceed that and make it to the next level or further to do that. And in doing that, you need that experience of an international manager. I think I like to stay away from probably managers that are in the 70s. But that being said, there are a few out there that are available right now that do have that international experience. So you don't eliminate that option, but I think that sort of you're going to need a manager that's going to have that stamina to be able to do that. And I can't read these people's minds or whatever, but will they have that?
Yeah. I think that's fair. I think we're more likely, in my opinion, to get an international manager who's kind of had a lot of mid teams. We're not getting a guy, and because they just don't exist, where they've managed the top teams, and even the guy who has is Roberto Martinez, and I'm not sure he's the guy I want to come manage the U.S. men's national team because he hasn't really done much with Portugal. We'll see how he does with Spain, or excuse me, he didn't really do much with Belgium, and we saw what he did with Portugal. He did okay, but never really got them above the hump. I think if you want to talk about what Matt Crocker said, his characteristics, if you will, qualities, qualifications for a new head coach would be, he said that he wants a, quote, serial winner. Looking for a serial winning coach and a coach that can also build on the work that has already been put in place. I think that term serial winning coach, serial winner is important. Now, I think that the problem is, what does that look like? And, are you really able to get a coach at that level? But that's a good target to have, right?
It is, but I'm skeptical, as rightfully so, right? I'm not. Look, we're seeing some big names thrown around. Some I don't think that we have a shot at. Others I would absolutely love to have that are already being spoken to, right? So But it's not the first time, right? The last time around, Zidane got talked to. Oh, I didn't want it. Like, you know what I mean? But then there's like, oh, I didn't really talk to me. It's like talking, like, in actually having the conversation, because this can't drag on. They've got to have like, hey, it's available. You're available after, you're available now. You're available after the Olympics. Are you interested? This is kind of what we can offer. Like, and then we can start having conversations about some logistical stuff, right? Getting into that, because if you don't already have a list in your desk, Matt Crocker, then that's a problem to me.
Yeah.
Right? You need to have a list of in the case of anything happens, right? Greg,
Goes
gets
to find another job.
dies,
Yeah, maybe.
right?
Yeah.
Maybe he leaves, right? So you've got to have that list ready to go of potential coaches, and it's got to be interchanging, because I don't believe, well, and I'm probably proven wrong on this, but I don't believe an active coach with a current club is gonna say, yeah, I'm gonna take the U.S. job. I can see
Right.
to me,
Yeah.
I see some of these people predicting these things. I'm like, based on what? Like, why would someone leave? Unless they absolutely wanted this position. Maybe there's a handful of people that do that, would do that, but to come over. But to me, it's a little far fetched, I think, to assume that sort of thing is going to happen. There's a few cases with some of the Olympic coaches that typically their contract runs out after the Olympics. That may be options, right? But some of
Yeah.
these other ones, I don't know.
He had a good line where he just said, we needed to have found a way to win. Now is the time to turn that progress into winning. Talking about the good things that Berhalter did. But I think that's kind of leads me to my next thing is I don't want you to erase the things we've done, because I do think having a U.S. team that is comfortable in possession, comfortable with the ball is good, but you need to build and evolve it. The thing that Greg couldn't do. And then Cracker also mentioned wanting a coach who's great at player development. And I understand the ideal behind that. I truly do. But I got to be honest, I don't care about player development at the national team, like from a national team coach for the next 2 years. Does that make sense? And that doesn't mean his job isn't to help nurture the players and help them grow as both players and individuals in his capacity. But I think that was the issue, is Greg was so focused on development and teaching that it got lost that we have to also win. And that's where that accountability, I think, fell through.
Yeah, and I think it's so to me, and I've said this before, international coaches aren't developing anything, right? Like you have the players you have.
Yeah.
If you want, you have to be able to identify the player, maybe their strengths, maybe their weaknesses.
Any development done at the national team level is Matt Crocker's job, because he's in charge of that youth player development pipeline. You know what I'm saying? That's not the head coach's job.
Well, right, and even then, you're not developing. Like, you're developing the program, and that's what I mean. Maybe just how I took the piece of it, but like, you develop the program in a way, but you develop it by winning. The winning culture. We said this a lot over the last several years. The winning culture of the program, right? And how you do that, and so I think you can develop certain things, certain tendencies, in those small windows of time. But again, this is where I get so frustrated that we had like a potential 6-week window where you have these guys all together, like,
Yeah.
and you miss it. You missed it,
Yeah.
right? You missed it by 2 weeks. And that's where you kind of miss out on that, and you lose that so-called opportunity to develop your group of players to be able to, have fun and be creative with one another, right? In that. And I think, yeah, I don't know. I just think maybe they just don't have the soccer minds behind it. That's the thing. You know what I mean? I'm not sure Matt Crocker has that or not. He has another chance here, and I'm pretty sure they're not calling the old metric group there to
Yeah.
run their numbers on it, because if they're tipping the scales toward to what they wanted before, and that's not working. So.
Well, the good thing is that Cohen and Crocker both said that, there aren't a lot of financial limitations. Now, we both understand, despite what USMNT Twitter thinks, there are actual financial limitations on what the U.S. can offer from a salary perspective. Now, is it whatever Greg was making, which is, around $2.5 Like, no, we can go higher than that. There's no real boundary, and like there's not a hard ceiling at that level. But there are going to be there's going to be a point where the federation cannot pay a coach. Just throwing a number out there, they're not going to be able to pay a coach $10 million a year. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't think you have to do that. I mean, I think 5 to me is kind of on,
I
4 or
think that
5.
has to be your ceiling. And the way I look at it is like an electric fence for a dog, where you're like, I know it's there. Can I go past it? And what is it going to do if I go past it by too much? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and again, the thing is that, and this is where when you get into the World Cup, then you start talking bonuses, right? Incentive for
Mm-hmm.
coaches to do that, right? It's like, look, you go and produce, we'll give you bonuses, right? Like, type of thing. And again, I said this before, and I don't have an example on the international level, and I'd love to know what the influx happened when, definitely the attention came on U.S. soccer with when Klinsman was hired. Like what can you do from a promotion standpoint? Like where can you go get some more money, because
Yeah.
now you can leverage the coach as kind of the face of the team, like they do in college sports, right?
Yep.
Like can you find a way to do that, but in doing that you kind of have to be careful too, because you don't want the coach to overshadow the team, right? And so that's what happened with Klinsman, is that he started overshadowing the team, and he was, they kind of gave him free reign on that sort of thing. And so there's a balance. You can't always give someone, creative everything on things, because that's, they do have to have balances and checks and balances of those sorts of things. So there's got to be a way to find that sweet spot there, of that. So the opportunity there.
Well, I think there are definite ways to sweeten the pot, if you will, right? Base salary is one thing. There are, as you said, bonuses and incentives. There are, I mean, if you want to talk college coaches, find out ways to sweeten supplement his earnings with stock options, with investment properties, with, I'm just not joking, ownership of a Volkswagen dealership in major metro areas. Those are ways that you can leverage your sponsorship to make the coach feel important, and make sure that they know that you're not just getting $2 million a year for right now. That's just a number, but if you get Volkswagen dealership in, Metro and Alpharetta, Georgia, which is just north of the city, a fairly affluent place, as an example, you're going to be making money off of that for life. Maybe it's a beach house somewhere in whatever beach they want to be in. Like those are ways that you can find opportunities to make yourself special to them. And I think you got to explore what those other financial incentives can be.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this new marketing person has any, we've
Yeah,
seen, you know, I feel
that
I
was
do feel
wild.
I do feel for her, because I think she got unnecessary wrath. It's poor timing on U.S. soccer, which is not shocking, but again, the marketing people are going to market what they need to get the money
Yeah,
out of it, right? And so, you've got 2 years where you can market the hell out of this World Cup and make the most of it, right? It's like you've got to figure that out to be able to get the best bang for your buck, because I don't think you can afford to fail on this, right? And so, and here's the one thing, and this kind of surprised me a little bit, right? So there's more people paying attention to this than people realize, right? So I, was with a group of people, and I brought up the soccer team, and they're like, they're terrible, whatever, they're horrible. And it's like, okay, these are people that probably don't watch soccer, but they're in tune
right.
enough to what's going on. And this is younger generational people, and they're like, they're terrible, type of thing. Like they're aware of it, right? And so I don't know if U.S. soccer even realizes like that impact. Why do I don't watch them? They don't, their coach is terrible, and so, and probably it's coming from some of their parents that watch it, but like, look, it all connects together, and I think that's where the right hire needs to be, something that's going to excite the fan base, pull in, because I can tell you can pull in other passionate fans, because I've heard this. Messi's done it for the MLS, right?
Yep.
He's come over And I know people that I'm never going to watch MLS. Oh, the Messi thing is, really interesting to me, right? It's a flash in the pan, whatever. He's going to be there for a few years and it's gone, right? But it's gained interest enough. So same with a top tier winning coach, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of top tier winning coaches, I don't think we have too many of those on our list, but what's your kind of short list of guys you're going to talk to if you were Matt Crocker and JT Batson and Cindy Parlow-Cohn?
Yeah, so I've got like mine are pretty much currently free agent coaches that are international. I have other lists, and I can quickly go through those, but like former German coach, Joachim Low, like I mean,
Yeah, who knows what he's doing right now?
right? He's been
He
out.
might be interested.
Right, he's been out of the game for a while, right?
Yeah.
Renard's another one, right? He's with the women right now at the Olympics. His contract ends at the end of the Olympics. They say there's rumors other clubs interested in international clubs interested in him for $2 million, right? Like, to me, he's my number one choice, right? He just is. And then you've got I'm gonna butcher these names, but you've got he's from, I think, Denmark or Switzerland. I can't remember.
Oh, the Swiss coach, Murat Yakin.
Yeah, and so
Yeah,
like,
he's on my list.
right. So he's a coach, right?
Well, he might not be out of contract like now, I think, but like he's out of contract as of the Euros ending. So whether that was when Switzerland was eliminated or,
And determined
Monday morning at 9 a.m. or whatever it is, but he is a free agent for all intents and purposes. And, what is that contract going to get? I can't imagine the Swiss Federation is particularly more, inclined to pay a coach a lot of money than the U.S. one. I don't know.
Yeah, and then and that's the thing, right? Like, there are certain ones that have earned it over time, and I think coaches like that in that mid sort of like experienced, maybe have had some big wins in tournaments, but just have never been able to get over the top. Though I think those are the ones that you'll probably end up really, people will really be watching, right? Because those are more realistic in terms of like the pursuit of them, and so. And
Right.
maybe it's a quick conversation. Are you interested? Nope, not interested. Okay, like, and then you move on or whatever. And it all depends what their number one target is, right? When it comes to these coaches. But again, I go back to it. Um, it's got to be international. And so the other one I have, I think he's also a free agent. Last time it was, I'm gonna butcher these names. I'm sorry. It's he's from Argentina. Jorge Sim.
Jorge Sampaoli. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Chile and Argentina definitely
yeah,
experienced with international management. You're right.
you know what I mean? Like someone like that. And I think those to me are kind of the ones that are available that you go and talk to and see, and start the conversation there. I'll mention there's 4 US options, none of which I want, but I would be okay with some of these options maybe coming in as an assistant, right? Some of the ones, and doing that, and getting a little bit of American flavor there, because I think that's the compromise, right? Because I think you do have to get rid of Berhalter's whole staff, in my opinion. And if you do want to pull in a few others that are new, you can, Hugo Perez, Tab Ramos, and David Wenger. And David Wenger is one that Wenger, whatever you call him. He may be one that actually gets considered for the position, right? Because
I do think he is one that you should consider. He doesn't have the international management experience, but he does have international playing experience with the U.S. And that, while he is a German coach, if you will, he played for the U.S. men's national team, and he has plenty of club experience for sure.
Yeah, I think they're, that's kind of the crux of it. And I have Bruce Arena on here, and it's not really a joke, everyone. Like, you laugh and joke about it, but like, you know what I mean? If they can't find someone that they're comfortable with, that would not be the biggest shock in the world if they said, "Hey, Bruce, look, you failed in 2017. That's not part of the New England Revolution situation was crappy. It didn't end the way you wanted to. We've seen him on the goals. I don't know what it was, CBS Dempsey
Oh
and
yeah, the
Kate Abdo and
kicking it.
kicking it, right? He was on there, and he's not, in his mind, he's not done, right? 72 years old. Here's 2 years. Here's your last, your last stand, to make that impression. Like, I think, as much as I would not want this, like, I don't think it's off the table until you can secure the type of manager that you kind of want, because he is available and he knows the system and he has, he does have experience. But and so um, hopefully I'm wrong and that's not even
Yeah.
considered at all. But U.S. soccer does crazy things.
For the record, Joaquin under Switzerland at this Euros 2024, his salary was reported, according to Finance Football, he was at 1.6 million pounds. So that's a little less than $2 million. For the record, there are reports out on Twitter that Hervé Renard has been offered jobs from Egypt and Nigeria, and the offer was around 2 million euro as well. So it does look like the U.S. Can get a good coach, a better coach, I think, for a little less than 3 million. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that's, and I think that's, they're fine with that. But, I mean, look, you have
Here
to.
are the coaches making more than 3 million at this tournament, right? Luciano Spalletti from Italy, Ronald Koeman from Netherlands, Didier Deschamps from France, Roberto Martinez from Portugal, Julian Nagelsmann from England, and Julian Nagelsmann from Germany, and Gareth Southgate from England. Now, I don't think any of those guys are coming to the U.S. Do you get, I think you have to have some ounce of reality. Southgate, maybe. Spalletti, maybe. But Deschamps, if he's done with France after this, he's not coaching anywhere for a while. Certainly not the U.S. The dude's a World Cup winner. That's unlikely to happen. Koeman probably will want to go back to the club game. Martinez, who knows what he's going to do after Portugal. But you can get a good coach for around $2.5 to $3 million to get a good coach here.
Yeah, I just looked at, in 2018, Joachim Low, his salary was 4.5 million annually, right? So that's
Right.
on the high. That's on the high end. So if you could get someone of that experience, of that success, then
Right.
okay, then you throw the 5 million at them, right? Right. But to your
Right.
point, I think there are better quality coaches that can get more out of this group than that 2.5 million to 3 million, 3.5 million. You can make that work, right? And again, it's for 2 years, and that's it, right?
And that's 100% it. Is that this is not 7 million for the next 10 years, right? You need to pay this coach for 2 years, because I don't need this coach to coach past 2026. That is, this is not a long-term thing. Get it through the World Cup in 2026, right? So if you can't afford 4 to 5 million for the next 2 years, what are all these ticket price increases for? What are all these referee certification and coaching certification increases for?
Well, right. I mean, and that's the thing. I think fans are okay, relatively speaking, paying a little bit more for things, and also seeing it in front of them, okay, and being behind it, and that's the thing. Again, the Gregg Berhalter thing, he is just, I didn't see, I don't remember so much discontent from one manager and almost no one supporting him as with Gregg Berhalter, right? I've
Right.
been following the game for a very long time, and he had some of the worst, you know, like, had no support. He really had no support. It was 90% of people didn't support him. And again, it kind of goes into the phase where he didn't thank the fans. He didn't thank, the American Outlaws. He didn't thank anyone, right? And he had the, and that wasn't the first time he didn't thank them, right? He had to come back a couple times and thank them, right? So to me, that's an arrogance in him that he didn't appreciate the fans. And so I'm sorry, the group of fans, while some crazier than others, some petty than others, it's a passionate group that just wants to see their team win. And
Yeah.
and the fact that Gregg just totally dismissed that, that's I think that speaks volumes to really how he is as a coach, as a person, and it's disgusting to me personally because he's never going to be in a situation where you have that passion and love for the game, right? Like, you have to respect that as well and understand that. If you've ever been a passionate fan of anything,
Yeah.
then you have to understand that.
Well, look, Matt Crocker has his work cut out for him, because this is, as much as getting the women's coach right was a big task, this is going to be a harder task. Getting the women's coach right was a matter of, can the best coach you can get, will they come to the U.S. team? And he got that. It cost him a lot of money, and that's what I hope he learned, is that to get Emma Hayes, the reason Emma Hayes is making almost as much as Gregg Berhalter was making has more to do with the fact that they were going to have to get her away from Chelsea than it did the equal pay stuff. I mean, they had to pay her a lot just to get her to consider leaving Chelsea. So
right, and she earned that though, right?
She did. But
right.
And that's the thing. You had to pay a lot because she deserved, she earned not just a big salary, but also she could go back to Chelsea. And Todd Boehly would have said, okay, yeah, I'll pay that. That U.S. Soccer had to find whatever that point was that Chelsea wasn't going to be able to fully match it. And Hayes was like, yes, I'll consider this. So you're going to have to do that to an extent with whatever your next coach is. You're going to have to spend money to get a coach who is better than Berhalter to come in. And to be fair to Berhalter, it's not like any coach is just better than Gregg Berhalter. I know some people are saying that. That is not a fact. But you can get a pretty darn good coach, as we just looked at, for somewhere around $2.5 million a year. And if it takes $3 million a year to sweeten it, so they for sure come, because apparently that's what kind of Bernard is looking at, is I think he knows he's desired, so he's going to leverage that and try to get as much money as he can. Well, be prepared to give him money. Be prepared to give him other financial things.
And who's on your list, Bart? Do you have any
Well, I had Bernard. I had Murat Yakin from Switzerland. A couple that you didn't mention, Luis Felipe Scolari, guy who managed Brazil and Portugal, is someone who I think you should ask. I don't think he wants to manage anymore, but hey, might as well ask. And then the other one is Silvinho, who is the coach of Albania here in the Euros. Obviously a very new coach. I would say that this would be I would be skeptical because he doesn't have quite the international management experience, but a dude who, coming from the Brazil team that, has performed quite well in World Cups and who has a great club career. And yes, he's learning how to be a head coach, but he has international head coaching experience. That might be an interesting one to kind of throw out. And a name like Silvinho, a Brazilian coach, would ignite a little bit of passion. And that's where I think for me, and this is not how I would always want to hire a head coach, but an Hervé Renard seems to be the guy that would make the fan base wake up a little bit. Like, oh, okay, they are taking it seriously. Obviously, it would make female enjoyers of the men's national team very happy. Hervé Renard is a very handsome man, and I, jokingly, all the soccer moms would be happy. But yeah, again, it would prove that the federation is serious. But no, I think Silvinho is an interesting one because he has experience playing at the international level. Obviously, had a time at both Arsenal and Barcelona. So he does want to play in a good possession style, but he's not, as with Albania, you can't just do that. And so I think he could be an interesting one if he's relatively inexpensive and if he's looking to move outside of, if he wants to leave Albania, if you can give him the money to get him away from that, might be interesting. But for me, it's Hervé Renard. Obviously, look, Klopp was asked. Who knows if they're going to keep pursuing that? But Klopp was asked. I'm with you. Go ask Lowe, see if he's interested. But I think from a realistic standpoint, because you do have to have some sense of reality, you're going to have to get a guy who knows that and to be honest, look, if Hervé Renard gets the U.S. men's national team job, that's a big get for him too. I know we can talk about how, he's won AFCON and all these things, but the US would be the highest ranked team he would have taken over. And that's a big deal too, you know?
Well, and that's the thing. Like it kind of works, in a couple different, ways for him, right? He doesn't have to qualify, so he doesn't have the pressure of having to qualify. Maybe he wants to do that, right? Maybe he's like, yeah, I don't want to do it right
Yeah,
now.
maybe he's crazy
Right.
like
So
that.
so it could be one of one or the other. He may want to do that, right? And so he's been known to say, I want to coach for every confederation at a World Cup, right? And he's working his way through, right? And so um maybe if the France job opens up, maybe he'll try to take that one, right? Like and knock that one off, right? Because he's been there with a woman last year. He's gonna be there for the Olympics for the women. So who knows? I
Yeah.
mean, to me, he has a lot of things that I like, but can he, is he able to elevate that talent? Obviously, he's doing it. He beat Argentina, the only team to beat him at the World Cup. Was it a fluke? I don't know. Like, there's all these different things, but I guess I'm willing to try. I think the hard thing too is for me, I have these lists, I have these things. I'm more logical in terms of how I look at this, but it's challenging. I mean, I don't know really how they go about feeling comfortable with that decision, right? At the end, I think Berhalter was the easy choice, right? And they wanted these different things, but you know what? There are other coaches that aren't American that have coached in the MLS that, that are available, right?
Yeah.
And so you can you go to those, you know, and see if there's any interest there? I mean, there's some that's part of the criteria that they originally had. Does that matter anymore, right? And so I don't think it does. I think you need to again try to find that experience that's there, but it's yeah. I mean, Matt Crocker has got some work to do here in the next month. Like he's no rest for the weary for this guy.
Yeah. Well, we'll obviously keep tabs on it. To pull back the curtain a little bit, we had recorded an episode about the Olympic rosters earlier this week, and I was going to sit down and edit that last night on Wednesday night, and that's when the Gregg Berhalter news came out. So shifting schedules a little bit. That will probably be out soon after this one. But Thomas, thank you again for chatting with me on somewhat short notice. This definitely wasn't something we had planned, and sharing your thoughts and perspectives on why this is so important for the U.S. national team to get right.
Yeah, not a problem. I'll be on social media just waiting for the little tidbits to come out. I think it's hard. Again, I said earlier, but I think as fans, just be careful of your excitement when you hear they've talked to so and so. We've seen this before. Isn't the first time. It's U.S. soccer has been known to just we talked to them. They just weren't interested, right? And then just going to like the less common denominator. Like you want to start at the top, work your way down the list, but you don't go from Zidane or Klopp to down to Steve Sherrunlow. Like to me, that's not doing your due process, right? You need to be hit. There's 50 candidates out there that you should be talking to before you talk to another American MLS coach. Sorry, there just are. And if you're not going to willing to do that, then maybe the job isn't for you.
Well, and that's where we do still have to keep pressure on Crocker, and as fans, that's our duty. So if you're listening, don't be satisfied, don't be complacent, but this is a very important and pivotal moment for our federation because they do need to get this hire right to bring in 2026 in a exciting and successful manner. So again, Thomas, thanks for joining me. Thank you everyone for listening. Don't forget to follow Thomas at US Keeper. Follow me at Soccer for Us Pod. I'm Bart. I'm out.